And welcome to my live interview today. I have a gentleman named Rick Ornelas to share with you today. He is a gentleman who is changing the world, but that was not always his plan. It took the pressure, the isolation, the anxiety, and the desperation that took place in his life in 2020, among all of our other lives in 2020 during this pandemic that we have gone through, that gave him a wake-up call. And so I want to share with you this. He's an ultimate success coach now, a best-selling author, and the founder of an organization called I Spark Change. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Danielle Bernack from daniellebernack.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. And I am so excited to bring Rick in with us today to share his story, including a near-death experience and dealing with the pandemic and a book that he wrote. And I just can't wait to hear what he has to say and to share with you. Welcome today, Rick.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you very much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I can't wait to get into your story. It is such a fascinating story, and the listeners are just going to love it. So I know that you went through this big change in 2020, but I wanted to cover a little bit before that because you have a lot to share before that took place in your life. Share a little bit about your life before that.
Well, yeah, you're right. I hadn't really thought about it, but I guess I do have a lot. I guess I do have a lot to share, as you know, probably most of us do when you start thinking back. But I grew up as the youngest of five with four older sisters. So my parents kept trying until they had a boy, and then they had me, and they finally stopped. But I grew up in a very tight family. We were very faith focused. Family was very strong. My father was a strong disciplinarian, so it was all about school and work and being disciplined, and I learned a lot from him, in my early years. But it was really I'd say it was a great upbringing, with my sisters and everything, and they helped to they always told my wife that they helped to get me prepared for marriage, because growing up with females. But I think maybe God had that in mind, because once I met my wife and we got married, we soon had three daughters.
Wow.
So family is very important for me, to this day, as it was when I was younger. And we have our three daughters who are now all grown, and my wife of 25 years, and I went from working in the corporate world for about 20 years to venturing out on my own and becoming a business coach back in the end of 2015, and that's what I'm still doing to this day.
Wow, that's so cool that your sisters helped you to be prepared to be a dad of girls. That's just really fascinating. Very nice.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
Before you said you became a business coach and all of that, you left the corporate world around 2015, but you had a number of tragic things that happened to you. Was that before you became a coach or after, or kind of a little bit of both?
I think it's really a little bit of both, Danielle, because as you're going out sailing along in life's journey, it's not always calm seas. You're always going to hit some tough times and some rough weather. And me, like anyone, I had some different times like that. And thinking back, probably the first one that comes to mind is when we were young parents, and my wife and I had just had two daughters at the time. So my youngest wasn't born yet, but my daughters, Ciara and Kinsey, were 1 and 4. They were small.
Wow.
And we were still figuring it out, like a lot of parents do. We're figuring out how to be parents and how to raise a family. And at the time we were living in Southern California, which is where we're both from originally. And we were still living over there. And I remember one Sunday afternoon, we were driving home from a children's birthday party that was
Mhm.
a couple hours south of where we lived.
Oh, wow.
And we had driven down for this party. I don't remember even whose it was or why we would drive 2 hours for this party, but we had driven down for this party.
It's funny the things we remember and we don't remember, isn't it? Things
It
like that. I
is.
mean, you would think you'd remember something like that. I know we all have things like, "Ah, why don't I remember that?" But we
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. I just remember the distance, but I don't remember, it was like over 2 hours. And as we were coming back, it started to rain really hard. And it started to rain where it was the first rain in a long time. And the roads became very slick and cars were pulling over because you couldn't really see.
Wow.
And I remember speaking to my wife and saying, should we pull over? And we kind of thought about it. And, I was kind of young and arrogant at the time. I mean, I'd been cocky and kind of felt invincible. And I was like, nah, we're fine. We can drive. And it's going to get dark soon. It was in the late afternoon and thinking, oh, it'd be worse if it gets dark. So we might as well continue on. And as we continued driving on the road, we were driving in the slow lane. And all of a sudden, we hit a large puddle and I lose control. I was driving, I lose control and we start hydroplaning and we're spinning out of control. And we start spinning just around and around and around. And we spin across 3 lanes to the left,
Oh, wow.
across 3 more lanes. So 4 lanes in total. And we're about to hit the center divider. And I'm screaming and my wife's screaming and I'm trying to steer and brake and do all these things that I can't remember what you're supposed to do in that situation. And for some reason, we don't hit the center divider and we spin the other direction and we spin across all the 4 lanes and we don't hit any cars or anything, but we go off the freeway. We go off the shoulder, up a dirt embankment, and we hit a brick wall on the side and we flip
Wow.
completely over and we land back on the wheels.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
like something out of the
Wow.
movies.
It was actually, because so as we're back on the wheels and I make sure that my wife is okay and I make sure the girls are okay, and they were crying, they had been asleep and they're crying at this point, and my
I could
wife,
see why.
yeah, and my wife seems fine, but the roof is smashed down all the way to like eye level, and the windshield is shattered, and the right side is all smashed, and the glass is all shattered, and the car is filled with glass and dirt, and none of us are cut or anything from the glass.
That's
And
amazing.
I know, and my wife said her shoulder was a little sore from the impact on that side,
Mhm.
but all of us are essentially fine. And we crawl out of my side, out of my door, and it's pouring rain. And this elderly couple had pulled over, and the lady grabbed this big blanket out of her trunk and she wrapped it around my wife, who was sitting on the side of the freeway, holding my daughters as tight as she could, crying and just
Oh,
praying
yeah.
and thanking God that they're alive. And I was talking to the gentleman, and he said what you had said. He said, that's the most incredible thing I had ever seen. It was like something out of the movies. And he had called 911 because he said, I didn't think you guys were alive. Like I thought, that you would have been killed by virtue of what he witnessed.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't necessarily realize how fortunate we were, because again,
Mhm.
I was young and arrogant and thought, oh, well, was it really that bad? But the car had to be towed away. It wasn't drivable and it was completely demolished. And the next day I went to the impound yard to pick up some things we had in the trunk because we had
Mhm.
been, traveling. And as I pull up, the truck is sitting on, or the car is sitting on a flatbed tow truck outside. And I go inside and the attendant greets me, and I tell him I'm there to pick up my things from the black Grand Prix that's sitting outside. And he said, that's not your car. And I said, yeah, that's my car. And he goes, no, that's not your car. That whoever was driving that is dead. And it kind of caught me off guard. And I said, well, why do you say that? And he said, because I can always tell by the look of the car what happened to the driver. If that person's not dead, they're at least in the hospital. And I, convince him that it's my car. And then I start really reflecting that, wow, that was kind of a big deal.
It's amazing how dense we can
Miracle.
be, isn't it? I mean,
Yes,
I
it
can be
is.
just as dense, all of us. Especially the younger we are and naive at how we can, we can blow things off. It's amazing what it takes to get our attention. I
Oh
mean, you'd
yeah.
think that would have gotten your attention. It's wow.
No, and like I said, I mean, I was in my late 20s. I was still a very, a young father trying to figure it out, and still very self-centered, and not really focused on others at this point, and in many ways. And it was really in that reflection period afterward where I realized that, okay, you got to kind of change things up here a little bit. You got to kind of, focus on your family, and you're lucky that they're alive. And I mean, I tragically, like, I could have been the reason that they, if something bad had happened to them, it would have been, my fault. I was driving and lost control and everything. And that was just all those what ifs running through my mind really caused me to reflect on what had happened.
And so did that impact you at all going forward, or did you just forget about it?
It definitely had an impact. And I'd say it's probably a little of both, honestly, Danielle, because it did have that immediate impact where I would sit in my car, because I had to drive for work. So I'd sit in my car and I would reflect for a few months after that, where I was thinking, wow, this is really special, and what happened. And I would pray, and I ended up writing, at the time, I wrote what I called a to-do list for every day. And it was 10 things that I wanted to live my life by, like being grateful, being present with my family, living like it's the last day of your life, treating others with kindness, and basic things that we should do anyways. But I realized I wasn't living by many of those things, that I wasn't doing those.
Wow.
And sure, I had been raised to be a good person, but I felt I was really falling short. And so it changed my focus in many ways, that I started focusing on my family more. I started focusing on others more. I started being less selfish. And as to answer your question, yes, there were changes. And then there was old habits, because we're all human, and we're flawed. And so you fall back into old habits, and you do good for a while. And then you start doing, acting the way you shouldn't, or like I said, being selfish, or wanting to go off and play sports instead of spending time with my kids, and things like that. And so it really took a lot of, I always say that, I like to tell people that, God was like chiseling away at me, like each time he's like to make a statue, you got to chisel away at it like thousands of times. And like, he's just been doing that like for years, just every time, like every day, just a little bit, just continuing working. I don't know if I'll ever be a masterpiece, but at least, he continues to work away.
I think you're already a masterpiece. I think we are all, we're just not done, but we're a masterpiece in progress. So we are a masterpiece now. So I think you are a masterpiece right there, right now.
Oh, well,
and
thank
back
you.
then. So
that's a great way to look at it, Danielle. So thank you very much. Yeah, just a work in progress, masterpiece in progress. I need a little sign that says masterpiece in progress.
Exactly. Exactly. You had some other things that happened with your sister and with your dad. When did that take place, and how did that play into this story?
Yeah, it's definitely a part of it, because so my accident happened. That accident was in 2001. 2001 is when that accident happened, January of 2001. And so, as I said, in those years, after that, I was kind of figuring my way still, right? Be good, not so good, work on it, be better some days than others. Well, then in 2004, my sister Linda, who had been struggling with bipolar depression, she took her own life.
Oh,
and
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And that was a really hard time, because it was, I mean, she had been sick and she had kind of been in and out of the hospital and everything, but it was really a surprise when it happened. And that was another one of those eye openers, another one of those signs that life is so precious and you never know when it could be over at any second. And it impacted not just me, but I mean, it impacted my whole family. I remember my mom, I mean, still to this day, and my sisters and myself. But it was that helped to, push me farther in that direction of being, being a better person, being the person
Mhm.
that I could be. And 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 less focused on myself and more focused on others. And that was really a catalyst for that. So I'm grateful for that. That she helped me to help others. But that was really tough.
Yeah.
And then with my dad, since you had asked, my father was, he was like me. He took a lot of work on his masterpiece, because when my
I like how
father,
you put that. He took a lot of work on his
yeah, on his
masterpiece.
masterpiece, because so my father passed away. It was, we just celebrated his, what would have been his 99th birthday yesterday. So he
Wow.
passed away in 2019 at the age of 96,
Oh, wow.
and July of 96. And so for him, like growing up, as I said, he was a disciplinarian. He struggled with alcohol. My parents divorced when I was 13. So
Oh,
it
wow.
was,
That's
it
another
was,
thing that wasn't mentioned in the story. A divorce is
yeah,
a big deal, but it's one of those things that many times society disallows the kids from mourning because they're supposed to be happier, because it's supposed to be a better
yeah,
thing. But
yeah. I mean, I'd never
it's
really
not.
thought of it
It
that
may
way.
be different. It will be different, but it causes trauma in some capacity because it's a tearing. It's like if you take a piece of cloth and you tear it, you can sew that back together as many times as you want. It's never the same.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And I hadn't really thought about, what you just shared about the, kids don't get to process that. But, I mean, who knows if I'm still, there's different ways that it's impacted me, but I know it took a long time, because there was
Yeah.
different ways that it impacted me for sure. Cause I was like going back and forth from one parent's house to the other. And then it, affected my relationship with my mom, and then with my dad, and then, and with both
Yeah.
of them. And there was so many things. And with my father, it took us a long time to really get to a good place in our relationship. And I think that's
Mhm.
part of why he was able to have such a long life, is because he wasn't done. He just had more work to do. And we went through some rough years. I remember where I would have been in my, gosh, 20s and 30s. And then once I
Mhm.
became a father, and we had that common, that
Mhm.
commonality, then that's where our relationship really changed. And then, as I had my kids, and he's a grandfather now,
Mhm.
and he ended up moving and living closer to where we did, because he had lived down a few hours away.
Wow.
And our
That's so.
relationship really started growing. So those last like 15 to 20 years of his life were really special and really, really important for me. I think.
Yeah.
I think as a father, as an individual, as someone that, in my faith and love and all these things that he taught me, um, they really took a long time to grow. It was a long time to develop and grow. And I was, that's another thing I'm very grateful, is that our relationship, that we had so long to be together, that, I mean, I remember a good friend of mine, I mean, his father passed away when we were, we're close in age, and when we were in our 20s. And,
Mhm.
so he didn't have very much time, just
Yeah.
in the scheme, in the general, length of time compared to what I had. And so that I feel that was a big blessing, and that it really helped to shape me, many ways, in the person that I am today.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's clear how you tell the story that that's a two-sided thing. I want to stop here and just address people listening that if you have a parent and you desire to have a relationship with them and they are still alive, you can reach out and see if they are willing to repair your relationship and to build a new one, because it's never too late when two people are willing. My mother and I did that also. And it is such a gift to be able to reconnect and repair a relationship that has been hurt, marred, broken, whatever is a proper verbiage there, but to
Mhm.
get to a good place from where it was a bad place. And it really is a gift. I never had that with my dad because he died when I was a child. So I never had that
Yeah.
opportunity.
And thank you for sharing that, because I think that's so important for people to realize, is that, time is the most precious resource that we have. I mean, on earth, in my opinion. I mean, it's more valuable than love or anything, because that's the one thing that you never know when it's gone.
Yeah.
You don't realize until it's gone. And then you're like, oh, I wish I spent some more time with so and so. I wish I did this. And
Yeah.
at that point, it's too late. And you still have the memories of, love or the feelings there, but the time, you can never make that up. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's never too late, like you said, for any relationship to be mended. And to use your analogy from earlier, where if something's torn, you can sew it back together. Um, Sometimes when you repair that relationship, it may be stronger. It may
Right.
be stronger in that point after being repaired, so it can withstand, future tears, because it is stronger. Not the same, like you said,
Right.
definitely different, but stronger in a lot of ways. And
It's like bones do that. When they
yeah,
reconnect bones, they have the scar tissue, and so it's stronger than it was before. So yes.
yeah, exactly. After going through that healing process. And
Right.
so, I think in many ways, like my relationship with my dad, for example, there was different things, scars or whatever, things that happened, or divorce, or the different things that we went through, that yes, it was troubling at the time, but our relationship became stronger over time, for
Yeah.
sure.
He moved closer to be closer to you. That really speaks.
Yes, yeah, it did. And even at that time, I remember, even at that time, I mean, it still took me a while. I mean, my kids were young and we're active and doing a lot of things. It took me a while to realize, okay, now I got to start getting him involved and sharing in his life, um, because yeah, it was the and I was always thinking, oh yeah, he's just gonna kind of live forever, and he did. I mean, from that point on, he had like 15 more years, or
That's
16 more
amazing. Such a
years, but
gift. Such a
yeah,
gift.
yeah.
Wow. So then in 2020, you had a very pivotal year. I mean, we all know what happened in 2020 in the world, the pandemic and all of that, but this affected you in a very specific way. Share with us what happened and then how that made you feel and everything, how that affect your family and everything.
Well, as you were saying, Danielle, 2020 was challenging for everyone. And
Mhm.
and when the pandemic hit and quarantine essentially started for a lot of us in March of
Mhm.
2020, that's where everything really changed for me, because my business coaching business, at that time I was working with a different doctors of different types, and chiropractors
Mhm.
and psychologists and so forth. And a lot of them, either they had to shut down or their business slowed down. They needed to transition what their services were, and cutting costs and everything. And so I found myself with very little revenue and coming in, and a lot of time on my hands, and all
Mhm.
the expenses, not knowing how am I going to pay my mortgage, or feed my kids,
Right.
or anything like that. And so I started getting very, very anxious and fearful of what the future was going to hold, because I'm a person that tries to have as much control as I can. I mean, we all have that kind of illusion of control. Oh yeah, I have control of my life, but just more and control the day-to-day kind of things. And then all of a sudden you don't have that. And so it became a stressful time for me. And
Oh yeah.
and like I said, anxious and stressful, and of that, with that uncertainty, which is an uncomfortable place for me. And at the time, I remember getting, as I said, anxious and fearful, and it lasted for a few weeks. And then I started realizing, I found that a little sheet of paper where I had typed up those 10 things that I had written 20 years ago, the list of the to-do list for every day. And I
Mm.
found it in a drawer underneath the little thing that would hold like the pens and all, the little tray,
Mhm.
right? It was underneath there. Because during pandemic, we started cleaning, right? You start cleaning. Oh, let's clean the closet. Let's clean this. Let's clean my desk. Let's clean my
What can I do? I can't go anywhere.
exactly. So I find this, okay, and I find it, and it reminds me, and I realize, I'm like, that I'm like, what are you thinking? You're in a far better off place than so many others. There's so many others that are sick or hurt or dying or and are struggling, and that I could do more by being grateful for what I had, and seeing other ways that I could help others, or ways that I could serve others, or do some of those things. And so I decided to focus on that. And I wrote a blog article about using the quarantine as an opportunity to be grateful and to help others and serve, and reach out to people that needed help, and acted on those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, it reminded me of a story that had been in my head for 20 years after the accident.
Mm.
And after that accident, when I went through that period of reflection, I was sitting in my car one day. As I told you, I would drive a lot for work, and my mom had given me this little guardian angel pin to stick in the car, and I stuck it on the visor. And something a mom, moms do give you something like that. Keep that in your car, and keep all times. And because she had convinced me that a guardian angel had protected us in that accident, for sure, that there's no way that we could have survived unless, there was some kind of divine intervention. And one day I'm sitting there and I'm looking up at this guardian angel pin, and all of a sudden this idea for a story hits me like I had just watched it as a movie.
Wow.
I mean, like beginning to end, I have this whole story in my head. And at the time I thought, wow, this is pretty special. Maybe I should write it. And I had written that to-do list. And so I started writing, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, I'm going to write this as a, story, a book or something. So I started writing, and I typed up about a page worth in Word.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I'm going to try to incorporate these 10 things into this book, and started out that way. And I really didn't know much of what I was doing. I don't remember exactly what I typed, but I do remember that I was trying to incorporate those. And I didn't really know what I was doing. And I was trying to, think back, when I was in, sixth grade English, how do you write a story, right? How do you write a short story? And so at that time, I ended up never doing anything with it. I ended up going back to life, as part of that process of not being the masterpiece in process, right? I just, it wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to write it. I wasn't ready as a person. I mean, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But after I wrote that blog, I realized that I was ready to write that story, and that I was in a much better mindset and place to write that story.
Okay.
And that's where I decided all of a sudden I had this gift of time that I had always been my excuse of, not writing or doing whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2019, when my father was in the hospital near the end of his life, there was these little kind of signs had popped up reminding me of that story, but I just kind of filed them away. Right. I mean, the little things kind of pop up about that story, but someone, oh yeah, you write a book. Oh, and I remember telling him, when I was there to visit him just a couple months before he passed, that I told him I was going to write a book. And it was going to be this story that I had in my head all these years. And I didn't say when or anything. I just said, and he got so happy. And he had always been a reader and everything. And he saw that as such an accomplishment, even though I hadn't done anything yet. But he was so excited for, just the opportunity that I would do that. And so I told him I would do that. And then, he passed in July of that year. And 2020, in April, I started writing, and I realized, okay, now it's time. Now I have the time. There's no more excuses. You promised your father, that you would write this book. And so I just started writing, and that's the book that eventually became 12 Hours of Heaven. And that,
Awesome. Do you have your book with you to hold up and show who's watching? I see it on the shelf behind you.
Yes, I do actually. It's on the shelf, so I can. This is it. I don't know if you can see that, but it's
12 Hours of Heaven. Does it have a subtitle?
Yes, it's Lessons for a Better World.
Awesome. Yeah.
Because those are some of the different things that I had learned in the time that it took me to be ready to write the book. Those were some of the lessons that I had learned along the way. Now, some of them were part of that original foundation of that to-do list,
Yeah.
like being grateful. But a lot of them were things that, and that's why I think it took 20 years of life, because the story was marinating. It just wasn't ready.
Okay. Well, in there, you have stories in there. You mentioned looking at the angel. Can you tell us anything about the stories in there?
Sure. So
Give us a little taste so people want to go and buy the book.
It is a fictional story. Okay. It's a fictional story inspired by what happened to me. And it's a story of an angel that is sent down from heaven, and he helps 10 people with some of the biggest challenges that they're facing in their lives.
Wow.
Because I felt I had been, as my mom had said, that we had been helped when we were facing, some kind of tragedy, and that we had been faced, and that I had been helped, that God had helped me through different times in my life, like my sister's passing, or my father's passing, or that accident, or those different things. And so in this fictional story, the angel, his name is Ezra, he finds himself trapped in an elevator with 10 individuals for a period of 12 hours overnight. And that's hence the title 12 Hours of Heaven. But they're trapped in the elevator for 12 hours. And during that time, he's able to help them. And he teaches them different things that can help them through what they're undergoing, like being present, or like showing gratitude, or having faith. And these are what I termed lessons for a better world, because as I was writing in the spring of and early summer of 2020, there was a lot going on in the world that the world needed some of these lessons, that we needed to be in a better place.
Oh yeah.
We needed to practice a lot of these things, and those are things that they helped me in that difficult time to deal with a lot of the things that were going on. And I wanted to provide some inspiration and some hope and some words that would help others during that difficult time.
Very timely, very timely.
Yeah.
And you started your organization, I Spark Change. When did you start that exactly? Was that at the same time, or how much after that? And tell us about that.
Yes. And I appreciate you asking, because that's really been my passion for the past few years. When I was writing, Danielle, I started writing in April, and I started writing very methodically. Just, hey, I'm going to write 500 to 1,000 words a day, and then just write every day and consistent and everything, like says to do on Google. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do.
How to get it done?
That's how to get it done, right? How to write a book. Well, when I hit the beginning of June, everything really changed, and I was waking up at all hours of the night, and I was having dreams and visions and this flood of creative ideas. And during that time, that's where the idea for I Spark Change was born. Because I don't remember exactly if it was in a dream or what, but the idea came to me at that time for I Spark Change, because I felt that I was being called to do more than write a book, that I was supposed to not just write a book, but I was supposed to have more impact in some way. And I felt at the time that the story was just being given to me. Like my writing went from 500 words a day to over 2,000 in a couple hours. Like I would write a whole chapter in a couple hours. And I finished the book in under 3 months. And actually I finished it at the beginning of July. I was like, wow, it'd be really great if I could finish it by the anniversary of my father's death, which was July 25th. And I still had a ways to go, but I ended up finishing it the day before.
Wow.
The day before. And I felt that was, he might've had a hand in that, but it's, all the ideas for what I Spark Change would become they were born out of that time period where I was just the writing was just flowing, and all these ideas were coming. And I Spark Change, it's an organization to empower others to spread positive change and elevate their social impact. Because what I felt like I was saying, the world was kind of struggling at that time. There was a lot of issues going on, and there was people that were struggling. And I felt that we needed some positivity and some positive change in humanity. and
Right.
that we need people to realize that, they can make a difference. Because I think for me, for many years, I didn't act because I felt I'm just one person. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to make a difference? Just the one
Mhm.
person. And then it wasn't until that time that I realized that, we all make a difference, and all of our actions um, can spark these moments of impact for others that have these ripple effects. And that's what I Spark Change, how it really grew and flourished as a result. And I officially launched it, I guess, in the fall of 2020.
Mhm.
And so for the past year and a half or so, it's been growing as an online community, and we've grown quite a bit on social media, and the community is growing, and we've added different organizations to be part of iSpark Change, and individuals, and just everyone with that common goal of wanting to make the world a better place.
What are some of the things that your community does, some of the varying different things that your community does to spark the change, or you said to increase social impact?
Yes,
And unpack
correct.
that term a little bit, because some people may hear that it might just sound like a fancy term to them. So if you could
Yes.
unpack that for them, what does this actually look like in everyday life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I had to unpack it for myself because initially I didn't realize that was a component of iSpark Change. Initially, our initial mission was just to help spread positive change. And then we realized that in my work that I do with business and with individuals and the coaching, I realized that when people started telling me kind of the impact of, let's say, one action, let's say that I impact one person by, I give them a creative idea and they put it to work, and then that affects 2 people or 5 people or 20 people or 100 people.
Yeah.
And that's that social impact. It's really wanting to improve humanity and improve society, by virtue of your actions. And there's a few different definitions of social impact, whether it's the environment or the UN definitions of 17 different things. But the way I look at it is it's just bettering humanity. And the impact component is around organizations or businesses or some of the people that joined iSpark Change that we spotlight on our social media. So for example, we have someone that we're spotlighting, their organization, uh, One Health World, that we spotlighted them last week, and they help in the mental health space, right? So that's good for that. That's the area that they do good and social
Awesome.
impact. Or we have someone else that they help through music and the arts. Okay, that's their way. And someone else that does charitable work, and so we spotlighted charities that do different types of charitable work, and highlighted them. And then the individuals are just people that, by virtue of their actions or work, they're doing something to spread positive change. Now, it can be as simple as you help your neighbor, you smile at a stranger in the street, you wave someone in front of you when they're waiting to get in traffic.
Right.
But what we are trying to share, Danielle, is that all of these actions, they're those spark moments that have those ripple effects, that just that one little action is going to cause many other actions because of it in a positive way. And we're just in the early phases of building all this, but our eventual goal is to have a social media platform, a central hub where everyone is connected in one place, where they can find out about others and see what people are doing and connect with them and support them and learn about their work, and essentially just make the world better.
That sounds amazing. So when you do these spotlight things, is that you highlight them on social media to spread awareness of what they're doing?
Exactly. That's exactly what we do. We'll share them on social media. Our Instagram is where we have the biggest community. So we do it on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and stuff, but Instagram is where we have the biggest community. But we'll spotlight them on those different platforms. We'll share what they're doing, what their work is all about. Some people we'll interview on our podcast to share what they're doing and amplify their work. But it's all to create more awareness, because if you have an organization in the other side of the world other than the people that are in their small community, nobody may really know about it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
by giving them a voice, by, expanding their impact, that's expanding, their reach and the ripple effects of their work, which is making the
Exactly.
world a better place.
Exactly. That's why I do my interviews here. On LinkedIn, I say I'm a Victorious Soul story promoter because I really want to help you share your vision, and all the people that I interview. Because, like you said, you're in this one little area, and every time you get on another podcast, you enlarge more people who didn't know you before will now hear about you.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And so your book and iSpark Change, do they go together at all, or are they two separate entities kind of thing, or do those merge together to accomplish the same thing?
I think they really merged together because the book was the inspiration for iSpark Change, and it is a theme that's woven throughout the book.
Mhm.
And it is a theme that is, so I'm working on a second follow-up book, and it is woven throughout the second book as well, of sparking change and those what we call spark moments that can happen. And so they really support one another. I always saw the book as being the catalyst to kind of make people aware initially, and I think it goes both ways actually. People become aware of the book from iSpark Change or vice versa. But I am working on having 12 Hours of Heaven made into a movie of some type, movie or
Cool.
series, or so more people can realize that they can make a difference and they can spread some positive change.
That's amazing. You said you're working on a second book. Is it like the same title, part 2, or do you have a different title for it, or is it untitled right now?
The working title is 12 Hours of Heaven, Time on Earth.
Interesting.
So,
That's so
yeah.
fascinating. So you
Thank
mentioned
you.
you have a podcast too. Is it iSpark Change?
Yes, it is. It's podcast is new. The podcast, it was literally just released 1 month ago, exactly. So just at the beginning of May, we released March, our first episode. And yes, on the iSpark Change podcast, we highlight people that are, again, spreading positive change, having an impact, creating social impact, and then making a difference in some capacity.
Well, congratulations on your new podcast.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been fun so far. I'm really enjoying it, and like you had said earlier, enjoy the interviews and sharing other stories, and that's
Yes.
important.
Yeah. So how can people connect with you? What are all the different ways that they can connect with you and they can find the way that works for them?
If they search the letter I and then Spark Change on any platform, they will find us. So we have a Facebook group. We have our Facebook organization page. On Instagram, as I said, that's our biggest platform. So if they it's I_Spark_Change, but they'll find it.
Okay.
And then on our website, which is isparkchange.com as well, there's links there for 12 Hours of Heaven, or they could go to 12hoursofheaven.com as well, but the number 1, 2, but on social media is typically the best, just because they can connect to anywhere else
Okay.
from there. And then the podcast is iSpark Change Podcast. They can find that as well.
Awesome.
But yeah, we love hearing from people in the community. Anyone that wants to join iSpark Change, or to be a part or share what they're up to, we'd love to hear from more people and see how they're
wonderful. To
spreading
join
positive
our
change.
Spark Change, is there a membership, or is it free, or
Free for anybody. Anybody can just join at isparkchange.com. If they join now, they'll get a free download of 25 ways to transform to a better you. So it's just a free PDF that they can get for joining. But yeah, no cost or anything. It's all, we want to get as many people in the community as possible.
Well, that's awesome. Is there anything that you would like to add, a lesson you want to leave the people with, or anything?
Yes, the same one that I share every day is that to not be like I was, thinking that you can't make a difference, that every single person listening to this, or that's watching us right now, your actions do matter. Your actions do make a difference, positive or negative. They do have an impact. So if when you start to think about that and you start to become more aware of that, then you'll find that you'll really want them to be more in the positive positive direction. And in doing so, you'll help create a better world for all of us.
Wow. Well, thank you, Rick. This has been wonderful for having you today. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for letting me share and inviting me to be on your show, Daniel. It's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Talk to you in a minute. Well, there you have it. Was that not awesome? Don't you want to spark change in your life and in your community and in your area? Connect with Rick. Google I Spark Change and find him and see how you can be a change in your world. And so till next time, I'm Danielle Burnock from danielleburnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. Bye-bye.